Taylor Trask here with me.
Todd A.
And you're listening to the Todd and Taylor Show. But for now, yeah, exactly. For now, we're debating names as we speak, and we've gotten a few suggestions, even from our episode 0, the primordial goo that this show is coming out of. We've got a few people who've gave us some suggestions. What are they?
The first suggestion we have is Todd Lore.
Todd Lore.
Kind of a mashup of our names there.
Sounds like I feel like that's if there's a super virus that wipes out humanity, it might be the Todd Lore virus. We'll be like, oh,
yes.
yeah, and then we'll be very sad about this.
Right.
We'll look back on that day like we should have never named our podcast that. So Todd Lore is one. I sort of like that though. It's it's obvious.
Yeah. Why not Tayod?
Todd Lore and Tayod. Yeah.
Honestly, we had talked before we even recorded the first one about possibly using our names in some geeky fashion because you are Trask, and there's of course what's his name, Trask, played by Tyrion Lannister in X-Men: Days of Future Past, the Trask Industries.
Yeah.
And I'm Mr. Anderson, which even just today someone referenced to me.
Nice. See?
Which is like literally I get, every week.
I was going to say, after The Matrix came out, you must have just been like, God damn it.
Which was hilarious because I didn't see The Matrix for probably a year after it came out.
Wow.
And then after that, I was like, meh, and I never saw the other ones.
Yeah, so, that's probably best.
Right.
That's, what, let's add that to a future episode because I have an entire dissertation on what The Matrix could have been, and there's elements of the second one that I was like, oh, this is where they're headed, and then they just so didn't, and I'm like, okay, we'll put that in the vault for another day.
I just did that. I just added it to the vault.
Excellent. But there was another episode title that somebody suggested that I thought was.
Oh yes. So then a Twitter friend of mine, Jocelyn Jane Taylor, suggested TNT. To which I responded, it's like you're reading my mind because we had just made these show notes where I called them TNT.
Yeah. There's something fortuitous about that.
I like AC/DC. I'm down with that, but it's, maybe it's a little too on the nose or something. Yeah. So when I responded to her with that, I responded with thanks, not no thanks. So she then suggested We Could Be Heroes, which I said was a great title because it's not there's not only like kind of
heroes just for one day. What you say? Sorry, Dave. If you haven't listened to David Bowie's live album yet, go grab that on whatever music service of choice you have and listen to that song because the live version of We Can Be Heroes, that's my morning jam. That's why when you said that I was like, oh man, that's really that song's a part of my life in a profound way.
Wow, I didn't even realize that's why you responded that way to that. That's cool.
It's Bowie too. It's just he's cool.
Well, and I also brought up that there's like this lowbrow component to it, which is that the Wallflowers, they did their best on it, and it ended up in the Godzilla soundtrack. Matthew Broderick. I almost said McConaughey.
Oh my God! So not even the new one. I was when you said that. I was thinking the one from last year. I'm like, I don't recall that at all. But the Wallflowers are back together. What? Like, all these questions were swirling in my head. So this was the unspoken Godzilla movie.
Right. So we have some choices. Honestly, I think what you and I have both found is that anytime we come up with what we think is a cool name, it's like it's like what bands do now. We Google it and we find out someone's taken it.
Yeah, although I just Googled this. As we've been talking, I've been looking at podcasts coming, We Could Be Heroes, and I don't see a series called that. I only see, like church
episode titles or something.
Church title, it's different things like that. So let's put a soft pin in that as a series title because I like that a lot actually. And then if not, we'll keep looking.
Sure.
But. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was probably going to say exactly what you were going to say with the butt, which is maybe we should just get into this. We're calling episode 1.
Episode 1, the first one. So last episode was episode 0 because that was us. Yeah, we were just toying around and seeing what worked and all that. But what we want to do at episode 1, since it's the first official one, is introduce who we are and talk about how we met. And I think this goes back to the days of, when you and I were both. You're in Nashville now, right? Actually.
Yes.
Yeah, and
I'm in an undisclosed location.
Oh, sorry.
I move around the
That's right.
country.
That's right. Well, at one point you were in Nashville, as was I. And we both worked at a company in Nashville, and kind of ran into each other. And we were friendly. I mean, we didn't hang out all the time, but you were a cool guy, and you worked with other cool people in your department. So like we were all mutually friendly to each other, and I think it was cool then. But it seems like after we departed that company, then like we kind of connected more. If I'm recalling correctly. And then I realized much later on that you were just a big old nerd like I am, and we were into a lot of the same stuff. You're a writer. I'm trying to be a writer. And just
I think you're a writer. I mean, you're a writer. You can own that.
I'll have to. I feel like to be a writer, I have to have written something. I completed something, and you've completed many things. So I'm like, well, I'm almost there. I'm getting closer. I feel like I'm in the George R. R. Martin camp of like. Just takes me a while, so I can sympathize with that guy pretty closely. But anyway, yeah. So I moved to Denver, and you moved.
I moved to Orange County, California.
That's right. Yeah. And then we just one thing led to another. And we had a series of conversations, I guess, last year, and every time I've been in Nashville, we try to meet up, and every time we meet up, it's like these 2-hour long like, have you seen this? Have you seen this? What is this? And then we're like, we should record this. And then sooner or later, you wrote an amazing blog post, as we talked about last time, about Avengers: Age of Ultron. Please. Actually, no, I always think you came first. You provoked it, yes. I provoked it, and you're like, wait till you read this, and I read this. I'm like, dude, let's just record this stuff right now. So yeah,
I was down with that. That was such a good idea.
And your geek cred runs probably deeper than mine. Like I came from the 1980s as a child of the 80s. Like my introduction to all of this stuff was He-Man. So I was obsessed with the cartoon. I was obsessed with the toys. The toys came with little comics. That was my first introduction to comics. And I'm a diehard fan of the original 1987 Dolph Lundgren movie. As much as people are like, that wasn't He-Man, I'll say this much: the two things from a He-Man movie that I don't care what else happens, the two things that have to happen are He-Man has to hold his sword up above his head and say, I have the power, and Skeletor has to be badass. And that movie has both of those things in spades. Like Frank Langella as Skeletor, even as a little 6-year-old kid, I'm like, oh my God. Like it blew me away. And then to find out later on that was one of Frank Langella's favorite roles he ever played. We're talking about like an Oscar-winning, or nominated at least, actor, celebrated actor of Frank Langella. And they're like, what was your favorite role? Was it when you played Nixon? Was it when you played, he's like, no, Skeletor. And I'm like, oh my God, that just made me cry almost a little bit. I teared up a little bit when I saw that. And so to know that was the case, they're going to remake it. And I'm sure it will be amazing, but I'm like, I still look at that movie as like my first big that was, and then other things too, like Back to the Future and all that cool stuff from the 80s that came out.
Firstly, I was completely unaware that there was a He-Man movie.
What? How have you never?
But secondly, it's so interesting to me that we both got, our exposure to comic books came from toys.
Yeah.
And mine was from G.I. Joe. And one of the first comic books I ever picked up, if not the first, on my own was G.I. Joe number 10. I specifically remember that. Mm-hmm. And I remember what happens. Pretty sure it's Scarlet and Clutch, and they're in this fake town that someone's built, and they're being poisoned in this prison cell and hallucinating from it. It was wild that I read that. And then it's only been in the past couple of years that I've read interviews with the creators of that comic book where they acknowledged, well, we invented the comic book in order to sell the toy, which, as a kid, I sort of thought everything went in the reverse. You come up with the story, because there's a movie and then they make a toy, and then obviously that was kind of the peek behind the curtain that oh, I've been manipulated my whole life. But then then I read a lot when I was in that age of 10 to 14 or something. I read a lot of comics and then put them away for a while and only picked up the occasional one. And I don't know, 8-9 years ago, I got into them again earnestly. And so when after we recorded episode 0 last week, after you had hit stop on the on the recording, you continued to tell me about how you had just gotten into comics as an adult, and it dovetailed so nicely with how I got back into them. So we thought, let's just do an entire episode that talks about comics.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're doing right now.
Exactly. So, well, and it's good, too, because you and I both seem to be sort of in that sweet spot of being Image fans.
Yes.
And I mentioned it a little bit on last time, but my foray into comics, I was never a big comic kid. I was always sort of like loosely interested in it. Everyone, I'd stop at the grocery store and there'd be like the rack, and I'd see like, an alternate Batman sort of cover, like a Elseworlds cover, and be like, "What's Batman dies? What?" Like, and just not understanding what was going on at all. My only sort of exposure to him were those little He-Man comics, and it was cool. And that was actually, it's funny that you mentioned that you sort of had this purist view of comics as a kid, and it was only later on that you're like, oh, they were meant to sell the toy, whereas He-Man, like, unabashedly was like, oh, no, this is corporate synergy at its finest, and we're teaching it to you now, kid. It's like the comics, stories in the comics would introduce a toy that would then be reinforced on the show, or vice versa. So, like, if a character appeared on the show, you're like, he better goddamn well come out as a toy, like, next week.
Right.
I need to add that toy to my playing sort of, scheme that I had set up. But I was just never really, for whatever reason, and this is going to probably, I can already hear the gasps of people as I say this next thing. I was just never really into the superhero comic thing. I thought it was, I know, at the time, because I was just like, well, there just seemed to be too much. I'm like, where do you start? When I kind of started, it was almost like a carnival ride that was going too fast, and every time I tried to jump on, like I just got disoriented and had to jump off again, or it kicked me off, because I'm like, I don't, what. This has been going on for a while. Is there a start or an end? Like what? And there was nobody living in Wall, South Dakota. There was nobody to go, hey, let me explain to you how this works. There's no internet, so I couldn't like go on Google and go like, what's the deal here? Where do I jump in? Where do I fit in? And so I just was kind of like, maybe. And it was only very recently, in the last 5 or 6 years, when I saw the movie for The Watchmen, and unlike a lot of people, I was like, what is this? This is amazing. And immediately went and got the graphic novel, because I'm like, I want to see how close it is. I want to see how it's different. And everybody was talking up the Watchmen graphic novel as like one of the pinnacles of the format. So I'm like, well, I need to understand why that is. I was just intrigued. I was incredibly intrigued. And then I became a fan of Alan Moore. I'm like, what else has he done? Oh, he's done V for Vendetta too. Oh my God, all these things. And that kind of put me on this path to like comics and the graphic novel format, but to want to find those stories that sort of go a different way with it, kind of are not what you would normally expect. And that led me to Image, the label that's all creator owned. I was kind of referred to it as the Green Bay Packers of the comic world, because it's creator owned. It's got a very, very loyal kind of fierce following. And I've noticed too, like, Free Comic Book Day was, 2-3 weeks ago, and I've noticed the people who are Image fans are like, they are like dyed in the wool Image fans. And that might be the same for DC or Marvel, but I will interact with other Image fans, and it's like all they read is Image stuff, and I'm kind of in that same boat right now. And I know you're not exclusively Image, but you're definitely, like, we were comparing our lists, and I'm like, here's what I'm reading right now, and you're like, here's what I'm reading right now, and it was all Image stuff. So I was like, oh, that's and it's crazy too, because the stuff you're reading, I am not, and vice versa.
Yeah, it's I mean, first of all, that business setup of being creator owned it seems to be a great model for them to use. Yeah. And I can't speak really intelligently about how they've done it, but I know that I follow John Layman and Rob Guillory, who write and draw the comic I read called Chew. And I know on Twitter they've made mention at least of that their responsibility is to make the comic and sell it, and if it doesn't sell, then they don't have a job. It's sort of like the opposite of Batman, where the title's going to continue whether that writer's on it or not.
This is the one where Batman poops his pants. It's like, oh, and like, it's like, well, let's do another one next week. No one bought that one.
So it's I don't know. It kind of raises the stakes a little bit, but it also makes sure that you're getting something that the artist and the writer want to give, and it's, they're never having to compromise because of the arc of the, the universe's story or something like that.
Well, here's what it is. Here's what it is for me. So the thing, it's not all the Image titles, but it's a good chunk of them. There's no ads. So it's you can read it start to finish, and if there are ads, a lot of times they are built around the story, so they're fake ads for something in the universe of the story, which I think is really cool. And then more often than not, I know Dark Horse does this a little bit too, but Image seems to be very focused around the design of the book. So the covers are very, very graphic design intense, or there's some kind of angle around the presentation and packaging, and Jonathan Hickman, who we'll get into, is one of those guys, and there's just the the Wicked and the Divine, like all those books, there's just a very considered sort of look to them that I really that even if the writing is crap, like I'll immediately get sort of interested in that, just because they're like, this is something that we're intentionally considering start to finish,
Yeah, well, I think that's part of that same thing of, when you get into an Image title, you're getting into the world of that one single title, and that goes from the packaging of the single issue or the trade paperback all the way to the story. It's like, from the outside in, you're getting that nice capsule of it.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about because one of the things we clicked on not too long ago when we were talking about this was just our preference on comic art. And this kind of goes back to my sort of late entry into the game too, because I just, for whatever reason, didn't gel with a lot of the way comics were drawn in the 80s and 90s. And largely because my scope was kind of very narrow. I wasn't aware of a lot more than just what I was seeing on newsstands and racks and that kind of thing.
He-Man, yeah.
He-Man too, yeah. And that was sort of like, well, this must be it. But it seems like even if the story is really good, it feels like, and correct me if I'm wrong, it feels like you and I are in the same boat of, if it's drawn in a way that's not appealing to us, we just can't get into it. It's like, I can't read a story for the story's sake if the art is not complementary to it, or is not in my sort of wheelhouse of what I like.
I will pick up a book with art I like, and be into it. But even if the writing is not that great, but if the art is not good, I won't even pick up the book.
Bingo.
And I have the worst example of that, which is something you and I have talked privately about, which is V for Vendetta, which is this legendary, series that's collected as a trade paperback these days. But as far as I understand, that story was Alan Moore actually had to work with several different writers, several different artists, and it just suffers. It's like I just can't. I can't get into it, and I hate it. I've tried to read it so many times, and my eyes just kind of like blur over because I'm looking at this art that I hate, and then I put it down, and it's just awful that I feel that way.
It is too bad, because you feel like, what's wrong with me? Because everybody's like, oh, this is one of the legendary titles. You're like, yeah, and the movie was, I thought, pretty good. So you and I understand the graphic novel is different, in kind of the details. But yeah, you look at, they pack so much into a page, and it's very tiny art. It's very hard to kind of see what's going on. And I would say there's a lot of similarity between V for Vendetta and Dark Knight Returns in that. And I understand Dark Knight Returns as a story is amazing. Like, if you go watch the animated version of it, oh my god. But the graphic novel version of it, like, I just can't deal with Frank Miller's drawing style in that particular book very easily. Like, I've tried a few times, and I kind of have to suffer through it, because I'm like, and it's only when he gets to big splash pages that I'm like, okay, I dig this. But it's the small, it's got a lot of those like very small cells trying to pack in a lot of stuff on a page, and it's just not my particular cup of tea.
I'll defend that one like to the end, because that's, and we spoke about this in the last episode. I came to it as an adult. I can't really speak about the history of what was going on at the time when it came out, even though I do remember it when I was a kid. It was just, the creepy Batman that I didn't want to read. But creepy Batman. As far as I understand now, he just tore apart the way that you write and illustrate a comic book. Made it so, and it's especially. It's especially incredible, I guess, when you look at, I'm always taken aback by how his Miller's work on like Daredevil, for example, was great, but it also fit within what you had seen in other comic books, you know. Whereas Dark Knight was definitely like this really big statement of this is not going to look like anything you've ever seen, and it's not. But you know, and it's not the same story that you've ever read, so I can see how it's difficult to get into. Because again, you talk about when you're as an adult and you want to check out some comic books, it's kind of hard to go, well, what am I going to like? I mean, you don't really know what can I get into? How do I jump into the middle of the stream on all these stories? Dark Knight Returns is one of those big ones that is inevitably going to come up. Somebody's going to say, have you read it?
Oh, yeah.
And
well, do you know what helped? Do you know what helped me honestly get my appreciation of the book, the graphic novel, went up when I got it as a digital version. Because I don't know if you've tried this on the iPad yet, but a lot of these digital versions let you basically the cell that you're on. It's almost like a shadow box where it's enlarged and there's a darker kind of thing around the rest of it, so you can focus more on each individual cell and not kind of be distracted by the rest of it. And for me, that made it a much more pleasing experience, because then even though I'm not entirely a fan of the art, I could at least go through it almost more cinematically that way, and you can kind of control the pacing. And I understand like that, the way it's laid out on the page, especially in the kind of that late 80s era when everybody was experimenting with the format a lot more. That was, the way your eyes go down the page and the way the page transitions physically is important to it. But that did help me a lot. And so if anybody's out there going, I'm kind of with you, I don't really understand, I don't get it as much, try the digital version if that is the case, because that does seem to make a difference, at least for me.
All the purists, if there are any who would have ever would ever be,
they're tweeting the shit out of me right now. That's why I didn't reveal my Twitter handle last time. I'm like, we're gonna wait until I've gotten all my dumb crap out of me and out in the open, and then people be that's just how he is. That's why you're here. See, if it was just me rambling on and on, like, people would be like, okay, but see, you bring the legitimacy, the credibility.
Oh, you're just setting me up for a terrible fall at some point. That's what's happening. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe we should circle back to that at the end of this.
Yeah.
Maybe about those books that got us into stuff.
Yeah. Well, let's do this. We're kind of. I know I'm sort of breaking our. We had a format for the show a little bit, but we kind of keep segueing nicely into different things. In terms of Act 2 of our little show, let's just go back and forth, and each of us talk about, and let's try to do them in order, starting with our favorite thing we're reading, and we'll each take a turn, and let's talk about what and we'll just go until I've got a big old stack sitting next to me, so I'm not going to go through all of them, but
are we saying it's exclusively Image at this point?
It doesn't matter. I just say whatever you're reading right now that you're super excited about.
Okay.
And a lot of mine are going to be, in fact, all of mine except for one thing are going to be Image. So that's just kind of the theme of my thing. But whatever you're reading now that you're excited about, and let's just each take a turn and talk about what it is, why you like it, where you were, the circumstances, and all that good stuff. And I'll let you go first.
No, I think you should go first because you actually have a longer list. Plus, I want you to start with East of West because we talked about that after the episode the other day, and I was so intrigued, and I'm definitely going to go in and read it now.
Reason I have so much stuff on my list is I took a vacation a month ago, and I went to Portland. I don't know if you've been to Portland lately, but you type in comic book shop in Google Maps, and you will find an amazing treasure trove of stores and shops that I have never seen anywhere else. I mean, every city's got their shop that's cool, but Portland's got like 7 of them.
I've never been to Portland.
Oh my God. And I went, and they're all different. Like one I went into was like a very, very clean, wooden floor, very well curated. It was almost like a museum. It was very, good selection, but they were very specific about what they were featuring. Just a really cool experience. Another one I went to was like somebody's hoarder's house. Like a dude who's had this shop for 35 years, and you walk down there, and I'm not even kidding, floor to ceiling, just stacked with books. You didn't even see the guy sitting behind the counter because he was hidden by all this inventory they had everywhere. But you walk up there, and you're like, I don't even know how to begin to to explore your story. He's like, well, start with this stack right here. And he pointed to a stack sitting right beside him. And it was like every single thing in that stack was amazing. And I'm like, oh my God, dude. And then I walked out of there with like, 3 or 4 things. I was just like, God damn it. I came back from vacation with like half my bag filled with stuff. So that's probably part of the problem. But yeah, my sort of image, it's interesting that we start with East of West, because my sort of image fandom begins with Jonathan Hickman. And I was over Christmas just in a comic book shop back home in Rapid City, South Dakota, and I walked in and there was the East of West sort of annual special issue that was a world building issue. I had never heard of the series. I'd never heard of Jonathan Hickman. I'm still kind of treading water, trying to figure out what I do like, don't like. I knew of Image, I knew kind of the different things that were out there. I hadn't really picked up any copies yet. So I grabbed this annual, I started reading it. I'm like, this is incredibly intriguing. I went back and got the first trade paperback. Volume 1 was super hooked. Volume 2, Volume 3, Volume 4 is coming out soon. So East of West, the premise is everything you know about American history is and then just world history is correct up until the Civil War. And during the Civil War, an asteroid hits what's I guess, as far as I can understand, it's about somewhere in Missouri. It hits in Missouri and kind of changes the course of the Obviously, the Civil War doesn't end like it did. It kind of ends in a stalemate. At that time, a preacher from the South starts writing this prophecy. And at the same time, an Indian chief writes the same prophecy, and eventually Mao Zedong writes the same prophecy, but they're all writing a different part of it. And at the same exact time, they all die, or at least two of them die at the same time. And then Mao, I think, finishes all independent of each other. They don't know each other as writing this, and then all 3 versions get brought together to become the actual prophecy that depicts the end of the world. Imagine then at the same time, the Civil War ends in a stalemate. The South becomes its own sort of country. What's left of the Union stays the Union. Texas becomes the Republic of Texas. The free slaves kind of reconstitute a new nation around the Kingdom of New Orleans. China invades the West Coast and sets up the People's Republic of America. And then probably my favorite twist, Red Cloud does what Genghis Khan did and unites by conquest or by treaty all of the American Indian tribes into one single endless nation. And all of those that they basically they signed this accord at the site of the asteroid or the meteorite crash, which is now called Armistice, and that's America now. It's this subdivided thing. That's the stage that we're set on. The whole graphic novel itself starts with the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse coming back, right? And they come back as children, and one of them's missing. So I think it's death, pestilence, and I forget what the other one is.
Famine.
Famine. Thank you. Yeah, and death is not with. I'm sorry, death is not with him. It's war, famine, pestilence, and death is missing. And you come to find out that death didn't. At some point, they all died. Along the last time they were here, they died, but death didn't die with them or didn't go back with them. So he's been wandering around this whole time. And he looks like, kind of this cool version of Sawyer from Lost and Clint Eastwood sort of combined. In fact, if they make this as a TV series, they better goddamn cast that guy who played Sawyer, because I keep seeing him as his character. But these the other 3 horsemen of the apocalypse come back, and they're like, he's not here. And so they go hunting him. And then the whole story is, how do they help bring about the end of the world? How does death stop them? How do these different factions of what is now North America, how do they sort of help bring this about? It's super compelling, and there's like a really crazy sort of mystic sci-fi element that comes into play that's just bananas. The really cool thing that, and it's kind of a sort of a spoiler, the really cool thing that I noticed was the Endless Nation becomes the most technically savvy I guess country. I don't want to keep calling it a country, but territory, if you will. They at one point, because all the American Indian tribes are now one. At one point, they all collectively decide to abandon spiritualism and all of their kind of traditions for logic and reason. So they become basically Apple as a society. And there are a couple, there's a couple of shaman and medicine men who are very resistant to that and kind of and almost double down in the spiritualism aspect of things. And so they even gain the ability to like summon demons and all this kind of crazy shit. But the regular Endless Nation become like the most technically advanced. So all of their their devices, their computers, all that stuff is what they export to the rest of the country. So it's super interesting to see like what would have happened. Obviously an imaginary universe. If these things had come to pass, there's a realism there that I really like and kind of a really cool what if. But the art, going back to the art, is amazing. Jonathan Hickman has it's like his graphic novel sort of background, or his graphic design background is coming, is full force here. There's a lot of pages. His transitions are just like clean white pages with, light gray text that have either a quote from the prophecy or just his own sort of comments on things. The colors are just gorgeous. I fell in love with this freaking series, and I can't wait to see Volume 4. I've been holding off reading individual issues.
So does Hickman do the art and write the stories?
No, it's Hickman is the writer, and he designs the books. So he designs the transitions and just sort of the layout, and then Dragata and Martin do the actual art. I think they take turns, or I forget who does. Let me just see here. Oh, Frank Martin's the colors, and Nick Dragata is the actual artist. And Jonathan Hickman's the writer, and he designed a lot of what you'll see in other Hickman books in terms of just the sort of the fonts and the stylized look of the package is definitely here too.
Cool.
But I'm a huge and again this is as of Christmas. I didn't even know this thing existed, and now I'm like, I want to see the series made so bad. And there's a twist that there's a really cool twist that comes along about halfway through that I will not reveal if you want to get into it. That's very worth it. And you're like, oh my, it kind of blows apart what you think was going to happen, and then you're sort of rooting for a character you never thought you would root for, which is awesome. So
yeah, definitely no spoilers.
No.
Just when you said that, I thought maybe that's what we should call this show. No spoilers, man.
It's too tempting. I'm gonna as soon as we say that, I'm gonna like let slip something. I'll be like, oh damn it. I'll be like, that's yeah.
Well, that description of East of West is like that leads so perfectly into what I would say about Chew, which is one of my favorite books, which is another Image title, and it has that same, it's a familiar universe, but it is completely invented. It's definitely like an alternate history of present day America. Where the main character is Tony Chu. He is at one point like a police detective, vice cop, and then he joins the FDA. I believe that's correct. But there's so many government agencies in this that it's hard to keep track of them. But
who wrote it?
So that I had mentioned them earlier. That's John Layman and Rob Guillory. And,
okay.
They have a cool collaborative art. That as I understand it, Layman writes it, but then he also letters it, which is I don't know. I like that about the books, that they're it's definitely a collaborative effort, and they pack so many visual puns and things into those, and little posters in the background and Easter eggs and stuff like that. That it's just amazing to look at, and the art is so crazy different from any kind of superhero book, which is another thing that really appeals to me. In fact, I think a couple of the books on my list at least reflect that. And I should also say that this has such a great origin story for me coming to like it, because the comic book shop that is like quote my local in Orange County is Comics Unlimited in Huntington Beach, and there's two women who work there, and with one of them, I agree with on like everything, comic book wise. And the other one, often like I'll ask for recommendations, and this is such a case where she'll suggest something like, and her name's Denise, and she'll suggest something like, "Oh yeah, check out the new Nightwing or whatever," and I'm like, "Nightwing? I don't have a crush on Dick Grayson. I don't need to see this."
Yeah.
So I generally, don't. I differ with her on opinion, but she is the one that told me to pick up Chew. And I did it. Just, I grabbed it, looked at the art. I said, "This looks cool." I took the first trade paperback home, read it breathlessly in like one sitting, and was back for number 2. And so I will admit, I am one volume behind, and I have been reading it in trade paperbacks because they also put out the issues, of course. And it would be impossible for me to keep up with that. So,
well, it's hard too, especially if it's been out for a while. If it's not a new series, it's tedious unless they're just super cool and you're just that much into it. It's tedious to go back and collect every individual issue and try to put pieces together. Like, I was thinking about doing that with East to West, but I'm like, oh man, they already have the 3 volumes out. I'll just start with those and
it's like Netflixing something too. Like, I don't want to sit down and read one issue and then have to wait a month for the next issue. I love sitting down and reading a volume where there's a thematic kind of arc to it, and at least to the best of my knowledge, that's sort of how people are planning these out. There's a story arc, and that's what gets compiled into the trade paperback, and it's great. And anyway, so let me jump into Chew. This Tony Chew detective has superpowers, which are food related. So you see, it's a pun on his name. He's Chew, CHU, and he chews things. And up until I looked this up today, I was pronouncing what he is as a Chibopath. But when I looked it up today, I guess Wikipedia told me it's pronounced Cibopath. So that has rewired my brain now, and I don't I feel like I'm going to mispronounce everything. But what it means is that when anything he eats, he senses the entire history of the food. So
interesting. Except
beets. So he has to eat beets because otherwise it will drive him crazy. So he's add into that world that the FDA has outlawed chicken. Add into that his brother is this famous chef.
Oh my God! So wait, what? How far is what year is this meant to be? Is this far future?
No, it's present day.
Present day, just alternative present day.
Yes.
What's the condition for outlawing chicken?
I believe there's just a disease that hits, and so he, it's outlawed. He ends up when he ends up joining the FDA. By another person who is a Cibopath. He is, that's how his real talent emerges.
Gotcha.
So not only can they do these kind of, it gets pretty grisly pretty quick.
Wait, so
because
it's not just.
So if he eats a piece of chicken, he knows who killed the chicken, and he knows how it was killed and where it was killed and like what it, what part of the world it was in. So immediately you can see where this is going. If he eats a dead body,
oh, gotcha.
He knows who killed him.
See, you made me think. At first, I was thinking this is like just almost more of a comedy where he's just like, "I know where this chicken came from." It's like let's go.
It is hilarious,
shady shit.
For sure. But it's it gets gross right away because I mean it's it's like page 6 where he's got to eat a body or something. But this world with these crazy conspiracy theories and this hilarious interaction of like all these government agencies that are, in cahoots with each other and fighting vampires and Cibopaths. And so you keep getting introduced to people with food-related powers. Everything is food-related. And I won't even try to pronounce the ones that I've, there's a great directory of them all on Wikipedia. So you can figure out what every power means, It's kind of the index of everything. And it's just hysterical. And add to that this crazy art that looks like nothing you'd ever see in a superhero book. And it's just awesome. I love it. And that would be my first recommendation.
Excellent.
Chew is amazing. And I believe they're wrapping up.
Oh, really? It's going to be.
I'm not exactly sure how many more trade paperbacks there will be like in total, but they have said they are going to end with issue 60.
Gotcha.
So yeah,
see, I like that. I like that. It's interesting you brought up the Netflix analogy before too, because it's probably there's going to be a lot of people who are probably out there who are like fucking duh. Of course it's like a it was always like this, where it's like a series that and the trade paperbacks are almost like seasons that you can binge, and you can get 3 or 4 trade paperbacks deep at the same time and just binge them all.
And that is where we lost our recording. So this is Todd. I'm recording this after the fact. Taylor and I compiled our podcast from the other night, and upon listening back to it, discovered that at that moment everything went haywire, and we hadn't noticed it until we were done. So we will continue to talk comics and other geeky stuff on future podcasts. We're going to call this one episode 0.5. We're still beta testing this thing, so we're going to get it down pretty soon. Until our next podcast comes out, you can find me on Twitter at HeyToddA. Please check out my blog at HeyToddA.com. You can find Taylor Trask at TaylorTrask.com or at Taylor Trask on Twitter. And we'll see you soon. Thanks.